Welcome. My name is Janice B. Gordon. I am the co-president of the Professional Speakers Association and a visiting fellow of Cranfield School of Management, consulting and training sales teams in key account management. Now, as a professional speaker, I talk about scale your sales, but today I am up close and personal with Bryony Thomas. Hello, Bryony.
Hi, Janice. Lovely to be here.
Great. Well, let me introduce you. 2008, Bryony started the journey towards where she is today, and that is all around watertight marketing and its methodology, working with ambitious growing businesses, delivering a 12-month marketing transformational program. Now, through her book, her speaking and her events, she has a real hands-on support network and approach to her clients. Now, Bryony now gives small business owners the clarity and the structure to step off the roller coaster, to get their marketing, to put their business on a sustainable upward curve. So Bryony Thomas is the watertight marketer. Now, Bryony, I'd like to start off by asking you, what is the one thing from your early life that has given you the greatest impact that's really kind of propelled you forward?
It's a great question, and I've listened into a few of your previous interviews, and it's so fascinating, isn't it, to hear about some of those early founding things that have created the people that we know and love. And so for me, anyone who saw me perform at the Professional Speaking Association Comedy Night will know that I spent my infancy living in a hippie commune in West Wales. And so what have I brought through from my early life? I grew up with a real sense of socialist values. And so I'd say I've gone on a curious rebellion from hippie commune to capitalist boardroom.
That's brilliant. I would imagine that there's still some of the hip in hippiness that comes out.
Yeah, very much so. And actually, I'd say I've gone full circle. And although I can make a good joke of it, there's so much in my early years and the values that came through from the people that I grew up with that very much comes through in the way that we conduct business now. So there's a paragraph in the Watertight Marketing book that talks about commercial karma, and commercial karma is absolutely, truly, wholly what I believe is true. And I do plan to write a second book called Commercial Karma and Why Treating People Decently is a Business Strategy. And so I am quite an unusual marketer in as much as I very much espouse a view that you shouldn't sell anyone anything that they don't truly need, which I know makes me very unusual, but it does make for fantastically sustainable and profitable businesses.
Don't you think that the world has changed somewhat? So, the kind of hard sell doesn't quite, I mean, it still works in some industries. It's still very, male dominated, but I think that the world has changed. The energy is changing, and with more millennials coming in through the workforce, they have a very different attitude, and the things that turn them on are not the things that, sales and marketing used to promote. Mm-hmm. So do you not think that that's a lot of that's happening anyway?
I do believe there is definitely a move towards being more respectful, perhaps, and I think it's I'm not sure whether I buy into it being male or female or masculine or feminine. I think it's more to do with whether people have an ability to really look in the long term. And so I think as capitalism matures, I think we've gone from the kind of Gordon Gekko greed is good, which was a very short term view. And I think actually what is very different about the younger generation is that they've grown up in a period of environmental uncertainty, and there are all sorts of things that have come together to mean that people actually have a much longer term view than perhaps they used to. And I think the kind of nurturing long term view that traditionally has perhaps gone with parenting and therefore is considered feminine, is simply a nature of being able to delay instant gratification and be a more long-term thinker. And so I don't really buy into it being masculine and feminine. But yes, I think the world's moving that way, but I think it's to do with time horizons.
Interesting. I mean, really, the beginnings of a lot of marketing was kind of very much embedded in like the Mad Men portrayed that, you know. So, you know, it's great that you're all on line kind of explaining a lot of that kind of more long-term thinking. But tell us a bit more about the beginnings of watertight marketing.
Well, so I would say, I suppose with anyone who creates a large body of work, I'd say every step I've ever taken has brought me here, which I know it sounds like an obvious thing to say because these are the journeys we take. But if I look back at every job I've ever had, at every qualification I have, there is something of all of it. So from my, my very early years and the values that follows through. I did a politics degree. My first degree was a politics degree, which is very much about persuasion and understanding psychology, and then I did telephone marketing for a number of years, and so perhaps that's why I'm a marketer who in many ways thinks like a salesperson. But that was telemarketing for charities, and so because I came through from the charity sector, sustainability of income was such a big deal in the charity sector that I think that's taken me through commercially to always be looking at sustainability. So everything I've ever done has brought me to where I am now. Probably the big moves in that was, so my curious rebellion landed me as director of marketing for a FTSE 100 at the age of 28. I worked at Experian Marketing Services in the UK. So I then kind of thought, is this where I really want to be? And decided I wanted to take that wisdom and work in businesses where I could make a bigger difference. And so really, watertight marketing has been a process of taking everything I had learned in a corporate setting and turn it into something really practical for more nimble businesses that are changing the world.
So as a member of the Professional Speakers Association, what would you say has been the greatest value that it's brought you?
The Professional Speaking Association, for me, I would say the value it's truly brought me is friendship. Not to say that I don't have friends elsewhere, but it is amazingly valuable to have friends who trust and support you and understand the context of what's going on in your life. And I think anyone who has any knowledge of the speaking business would know that there are times when it's lonely and busy, and simply living out of a suitcase for a week takes a level of energy that perhaps other friends and colleagues might not understand. And so I would say that surrounding yourself with a community of peers in whatever context will always allow you to get a perspective on what's going on in your life from people who truly understand. So what is the biggest problem that you see that businesses make in marketing, and how do you go about fixing it? The biggest problem I see people make with marketing is that they define it as lead generation. So I have a long list of people who've come to us saying we need more leads, and through a process of questioning we will always establish that they don't need more leads at all. They just need to convert more of the conversations that they have. And so I'd say that the definition of marketing is very narrow, and by its very nature very expensive, because lead generation is generally something you pay for, whereas proper strategic marketing and marketing that supports every step of the sale pays for itself. And the things that most people think of as marketing, such as advertising, whatever, Facebook ads, all of the things that cost money, are generally the last thing you should do. The last thing that you should do. Interesting. So you say that people should stop wasting money on marketing. Yeah.
And what do you mean by turning it inside out and upside down, so that every tweet, every post, every marketing move you make hits the mark?
So
it's really the inside out and upside down.
Yeah. Inside out and upside down is what we do. So inside out is to get people to truly look at their organization through the eyes of their buyer. So most people will come to a marketing consultant with a very we-driven brief. We need this and we need that and we need the other. And we go through a very detailed process of turning that inside out to understand what it is that customers need. What we then do, interestingly, is to overlay that with an energetic view. So there's the commercial we need. So we need this in order to make commercial success. Then we look through the eyes of your buyer, inside out. And then we get the organization to look at what those clients do to a business energetically. So do they make your heart sing or think? So there is ask yourself the question, will they pay the bills? But more than that, will you actually want to spend time with them? And then upside down is to build it backwards. So if you think about a marketing journey, think about a sales journey, and when you're mapping a sales journey, people will map it forward. So what's the first thing they see? What's the next thing they see? So they map the journey forwards. But the problem is with mapping a journey forwards is that people then start to build it forwards. So they say, right, I'm going to generate a load of awareness. And when we've got some awareness, I'll think of something interesting to say. When I've thought of something interesting to say, I might sell them something. And there are very few businesses that build awareness and then monetize later. They're notable exceptions, for example, Facebook, but they are so exceptional. And everybody thinks they're going to also be that exception. So rather than build a marketing journey forwards, a sales journey forwards, we say build it backwards, which is to start with your bucket. So the things that keep your customers wanting to be your customers, make sure that people want to stay there and it's a nice place to be. Then funnels and filters, and filters are as important. So funnels and filters, which is directing people to your bucket and filtering out the people who are energetically wrong for your business, and then taps. And if you think of not a funnel, but buckets, funnels, taps, then it stands to reason that you have to have the bucket first, because anything else is necessarily a waste of money.
I see. Interesting. So what's the most value adding thing in your business that's given you the greatest growth, and growth in terms of either professional, personal or financial?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I would say, knowing the audience for this as other speakers and people who have content, I would say that the biggest thing that I have done personally is to license my approach. So I have the Watertight Marketing book, which, so this as a body of work, so that this is probably about 20% of the methodology of the body of work. So I now license that to, at the moment, I have 34 licensees, and they are licensed to use all of the frameworks that go with it, 85 hours of video, a training program that they can flex between a workshop to a 12-month transformation. So I've created it, and I continue to create more things, and then I license other people to use them, which gets me over the time for money and the scalability, because I don't need to be in the room.
Excellent. Excellent. So it was International Women's Day on the 8th of March. Now, knowing that you have a daughter, what would you say is that we should do? What more should we do to push for progress, really not only for now, but also as a responsibility to the next generation?
Yeah, interesting question. So the 8th of March was also my grandmother's birthday. She would have been 102 this year.
Wow.
And she died shortly before her birthday last year. And she went to University of Liverpool in 1922. So I have some amazing role models in my family. Not least my father. So I was brought up by a single parent father, and I think one of the things that that gave me was in many ways not realizing that I was a woman, if that makes any sense at all. I had absolutely no idea that anyone was treating me differently because of my gender. So when I worked at Experian, so there I was, 28 years old, the only woman in that senior leadership team. Oh no, there's one other. I just didn't realise that I wasn't meant to ask, or I wasn't meant to do this, so I just did it. And looking back, I can see that a lot of the moves that I made were quite exceptional, but I didn't think so at the time. And so I am always torn between almost I'm ambivalent, and I can, on one day or another, I can feel very differently about this. So on some days, I feel like knocking everyone's heads together and screaming at them about the gender bias that exists. And on other days, I just wish people would stop talking about it and shining a light on it, because I think sometimes by doing so, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so truly, I don't have an answer. I know that I will bring my daughter up to believe that she can do whatever she likes because she can. But if I had a son, I'd be doing the same. And I think we're missing the contribution of really good men in this conversation. And I would love to see. So here's another angle on it. I think men miss out in this as much as women. So in my career, I think I've seen men not even ask. So they wouldn't even say, I'm going to go to my child's play or whatever, because it wouldn't even cross their minds to do so. And yet a woman might have eyes rolled at her, but she would ask. And so I think the gender imbalance that exists, men miss out as much as women, but perhaps not financially, which is why we haven't shone so much of a light on it. Men miss out on childhoods, men miss out on understanding themselves in deeper ways, and women miss out financially and in career ways. But I think both losses are equal and need equal discussion.
I would agree with much of what you say. My only thought is it's actually getting to that stage. Men miss out as much as women. But how do we actually get to the stage where men and women do not miss out? Because at the moment, we are shining a light on women in order to help men understand the plight of women, and it won't change unless men are part of the debate and part of the answer. So it affects both. The answer will affect both men and women, but actually the process has got to be both men and women taking a part in the process. What do you think?
I completely agree. But I think what's really interesting in the discussion about gender bias is that we talk about it as in economic terms typically, and when economics are involved, people look at it. So things like the pay gap reporting, etc. It might be equally interesting and powerful to perhaps look at the parenting gap in many households. And so because there's no economic framework to measure that, it doesn't get measured. And the relationship gap between fathers and children, or the household duties gap between husbands and wives. But because there is no economic measure, we don't look at those things. So I just think there are some quite blunt instruments being used, and they are economically driven. And I think one's well-being is so much wider than that it would be interesting to, not just interesting, a more nuanced and valid argument to look at it more in the round.
True. but I wonder, because you have the gender pay gap, isn't it the gap that is causing the gap in other things? It's having an effect in other areas. Because if both men and women earn the same amount of money, then they might make different decisions about who has the leading responsibility, in the home. Obviously, they've got lots of social issues that have got to catch up. But historically, there has been that imbalance. But what perhaps one has created the imbalance in other areas. I think that Norway has kind of led the way, and it's not perfect, but it seems that there is more balance in the home because there's more balance in the boardroom.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Yeah.
So I'd agree. Things like parental leave ought to be completely equal, and I think you should be able to swap it between yourselves. And yes, the pay gap should be addressed. And I think as much as women being paid more, I think there are lots of men who could do with being paid less. So there is.
They may not agree to that one.
No, I'm sure they wouldn't. But the economy probably couldn't actually take every woman who's being underpaid being paid more. So actually our economy would collapse. And it's not to say that we're not worth it. It's just to say that perhaps the pay equalization needs to balance, not bring in line. And so part of the reason why people are pushing back on the pay gap isn't that they don't believe their women are worth more. It's that they can't afford it, and yet taking money off other people is so unpalatable that it's not even being discussed.
Mm. It's interesting, there's a lot of debate in Speaker's Corner around women and, well, it's not just women and men, but it's actually getting paid a professional fee to do a professional job. Yeah. And then there's also kind of the sideline discussion about women not having the confidence or not asking for more money. So it's interesting that even on the speakers forum, this area of the pay gap and is certainly being reflected.
Oh yeah, completely. And I think it would be fascinating to do a series of these sorts of talks around speaker business models and the fees that people get paid, because I think there are so many things at play in what a speaker chooses to work for. And I think like any other content industry, so if you look at publishing, you look at music, paying big money for big names, in most content industries isn't happening as much now as it used to. And so they're monetizing in other ways. So through micropayments on Spotify, through actually using their music on ads rather than in the way that they thought it would be used. And publishing, I'm sure the big publisher many years ago thought they had that industry nailed, and it's moved on. So I think like any other content industry, we need to take care when we present traditional pricing models as the answer, because any business, Uber, Airbnb, whatever industry you're in, pricing can be disrupted. And so to present any pricing model as the way it's done around here is quite a dangerous thing to do. I would also, interestingly, picked up on a discussion about women's issues being paid less than serious business topics. And I think there might be a structural issue there. And I think the structural issue might be is that there is no budget box to go to for some of the emerging speaking topics. So it's fairly easy to know what budget to pay me from, because marketing is a budget line, as is sales training, as is finance, whereas there probably isn't a budget line for understanding how menopause affects the workplace, because it's quite forward-thinking employers who are now getting speakers in on emerging topics, and there is no budget line to go to. And so I think many organizations are bringing speakers in, and that because there is no normal budget line, there is no budget. But there may be in the future, if a few people start to demonstrate the value, and then you can start to put fees on it or charge for things in different ways. And so I think it's just very dangerous to assume that there is a given way to charge for anything. And I'm sure in the businesses that you work with, Janice, people are being challenged around their pricing structures and business models
All the
like
time,
anywhere else.
all the
All the
time. You know, SaaS is such a big area, you know, that if you think of Blockbuster, Netflix, you know, and it's all to do around the business model, isn't it? I'm a chair of a work stream in the Women in Enterprise All-Party Parliamentary Group, and it was quite interesting that we had Baroness Fairhead speaking yesterday, and she's in the DTI promotions side, leads all of that, and is a minister, fantastic woman, great career background as well. But there was a bit of a discussion around some stats that came out from Amazon. And so Amazon looked at their platform and were looking at the kind of the male and female divide, and looking at how organization, what platforms they use, and how they distribute their content, their products and their services. And it's quite interesting that digital companies, in the way that they distribute, there is perhaps about 70% of women that are growing their businesses digitally. So they're using online platforms, which is kind of the new way of holding running and growing your business. Whereas it's the other way around, the kind of more traditional models, 70% of men are in the way that they distribute their products and their services. So only 30% are actually on the platform. So it's actually interesting that female businesses are using this platform. Really, we want to do more research as to why that may be, and it may be because of the social pressures that they have and the way that they're starting at businesses. More businesses are started in the homes, so they're using the technology. They're very much more advanced. They're very much more social people. And so it's interesting what you say about speaking, not only not having a budget to go to, but actually looking at new ways of delivering the speaking and looking at new business models in order to monetize that might not be the 5 or 10,000, but actually you might offer it through a platform, and you may only charge £10, but if you've got 100,000 people on it, and it may be a recurring income, and it doesn't mean that one is better than the other, it's just different.
Absolutely right. And I think if you look, so if we look at the way that kids consume apps, so they'll pay pocket money prices, £2.50 or something for an app. They'll play with it for a couple of days, or even 30 pence. Pay for it, and then it's gone. Same with a song. They'll enjoy it, and then they'll get bored of it, and they don't mind if they never hear it again. Spotify's had its little bit of money, so I think actually. If we're getting our heads around micropayments, what we would need to build is kind of vaster, longer lasting audiences, which is so radically different from the traditional speaking model of standing on a stage in front of even a few thousand people. I mean, many people, it's just a couple of hundred you'll fit in most venues up and down the UK, certainly. So it's a few hundred people. Whereas actually, if you look at content consumption, which is what we're content owners. Every other content platform has gone to content industry has gone to micropayments and monetization in different ways. So surely there's something for us to learn from that. Yeah, it's interesting to say about women though, Janice. I hadn't picked up on that research, but it doesn't surprise me. I can. Absolutely, I can follow that intuitively.
And it really excites me as well. If we're looking at traditional arguments and traditional business models, we're actually naturally leading the way in the new way of doing business. We're just naturally doing that, and that really excites me.
Yes, yeah. Well, so Julie Creffield from Living Your Bigger Life and Too Fat to Run. She and I went to the NSA, the American Speaking Convention, last year, and a number of the streams that people were going to, which were around conceptual modelling, which clearly, I have 85 of them, and there were things about getting on daytime TV, getting sponsorship, growing your platform on Facebook, and Julie's done all of that. So Julie, if you were to look at an example of a modern and emerging speaking business, Julie Creffield has an amazing platform. Many kind of big name speakers, just don't have, and it was fascinating to go around the NSA kind of workshops and see how many sessions people were going to go, wow, this is really new, and this is how Julie and I have approached our businesses, mainly because we both have kids under 6.
Yeah.
And no childcare backup, and so through the creative requirement to find another way, we've applied our creative thinking to another way.
Fantastic. So talking about another way, what is the one thing that you haven't done yet?
There's loads I haven't done yet.
You've got to pick one.
I have a burning desire, which I believe will be satisfied in the next decade, to turn the watertight marketing methodology into a PhD.
Wow.
And I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. I'm sure you will.
On the list.
So what's the one thing that you're most passionate about, and why?
Professionally or generally?
Well, for you to choose.
So I get very animated about the use of language, and the power of words, and the way that the language you choose manifests in your behavior. So clearly that follows through in my parenting, but the way that it manifests in business, and particularly in marketing, is that I truly believe there ought to be a movement to change the way we speak about marketing. So, for example, I don't like the phrase target audience, because I don't want anyone to shoot me, and I don't like tripwires, because it's a disgusting thing to do to a human, and I don't like structural lock-ins or data capture, and a whole swathe of the words that that are traditionally used in marketing, because I think if you applied them to an actual human being, you'd be arrested. And I think actually using this language in day-to-day usage slowly picks away at your actual behavior. And I think if we look at sociology and look at dehumanizing language has been the precursor to some serious not very nice things in the world. And I genuinely believe that dehumanizing language in business leads businesses to treat people very poorly, both employees, customers, and the communities in which we live. So careful use of language and the way that it plays out in your actual behavior.
Well, I certainly look forward to hearing more of your careful use of language. Bryony will be speaking at the PSA Southeast in Brands Hatch on the 1st of May, so make sure that you book your ticket. Hopefully you'll have lots of questions for her, and she'll be sharing more about watertight marketing. So thank you so much, Bryony, for sharing your insight and knowledge, and helping us to stop wasting money on marketing. But I look forward to hearing more from you at PSA Southeast.
Thank you very much, Janice. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, then, you take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.